You watching Dante's Boxing Edition. You boxing.
Okay, you walk first.
Sorry, now speak me.
You're watching. All right, y'all. We got a whole lot of unpacking to do, so let's get into it. Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? Now, as you guys probably know by now, Canelo Alvarez, by his fans, he's always compared to Floyd Mayweather. You always hear these Canelo fans saying, oh, well, Canelo's just doing all of the same things that Floyd Mayweather did. So we're going to find out if that's true right now. Is Canelo Alvarez truly just following the entire Floyd Mayweather blueprint, or the green print, as Floyd Mayweather would put it? Does Canelo Alvarez have more in common with Floyd Mayweather's career, or does he have more in common with Gennady Golovkin's career? All of those questions will be answered factually in this video. Let's get into it. So the first mistake the majority of fans usually make when they're trying to compare Floyd to any fighter is they usually compare the old Floyd Mayweather, the Floyd Mayweather at the end of his career, to fighters that are still fighting in their prime. For example, you may hear someone say, oh, well, Floyd Mayweather, he fought Andre Berto, trying to compare his opponent to some other fighter's opponents while they're in their prime. When we all know that Floyd Mayweather fought Andre Berto in his farewell fight. That was his retirement fight. That was the end of his contract that he had with Showtime. And that was the last professional boxer that he fought. So my point is, to make an accurate and fair comparison, you have to compare these fighters when they were the same age. What was Floyd doing? What was Canelo doing at the exact same age coming up? Now, to get those answers, let's start with both boxers' pro debuts. Canelo Alvarez, he turned pro October of 2005. Floyd Mayweather, he turned pro in 1996. So the first question is, how long did it take for both fighters to not only step up in competition, but fight for a world title? Okay, when it comes to Floyd Mayweather, like I just told you, he turned pro in 1996. Floyd Mayweather was fighting for a world title 2 years later in 1998. But not only was he fighting for a world title, he was fighting against the lineal champion who was actually favored to beat him, and that's Genaro Hernandez. Matter of fact, don't just take my word for it. You guys can hear it from Jim Lampley himself as he's about to call the fight. And we know Jim Lampley is nowhere near a Floyd Mayweather fan. So check out what he had to say about Floyd fighting Genaro Hernandez.
Tired of champions avoiding tough fights? Waiting for two men to climb into the ring and actually risk it all? Wait no further. Genaro Hernandez and Floyd Mayweather are here. We begin with the 130-pound world title fight between Floyd Mayweather Jr. and Genaro Hernandez. The big question surrounding the fight, is it too much too soon for young Mayweather? Is this fight too much too soon for Floyd Mayweather? Merchant and Larry, it's common knowledge in the sport that Floyd Mayweather Jr. was likely to get this title shot at Genaro Hernandez's 130-pound title, even if he waited 6 months, even if he waited a whole year. Instead, on the advice of his father, he's going ahead and taking this bout now. A 21-year-old fighter with only 17 bouts going against a guy who's never lost in 14 years of fighting in this particular weight class. Why?
All right, so you guys see how fast Floyd Mayweather was willing to challenge himself against the best competition. Only 2 years as a pro, he was the first person out of the Olympic team to fight for a real, legitimate world title. So how long did it take Canelo Alvarez to fight for a world title? Remember, Canelo, he turned pro in 2005. It took Canelo Alvarez 6 years to fight for a vacant title against Matthew Hatton. And keep in mind, this vacant title was at the junior middleweight division. Matthew Hatton was actually a welterweight, and Canelo had him move up to junior middleweight. Now, how Matthew Hatton even qualified to get a shot at a title at a higher weight class that he didn't even campaign at is anybody's guess, but the truth is only the WBC and Canelo Alvarez knows for sure. So not only was he not ranked at the junior middleweight division, but the Ring magazine, they didn't have him ranked in any division, junior middleweight or the welterweight division. Now, and it's important to note, Canelo and Matthew Hatton, they were fighting for the WBC vacant belt. And the only ones that had Matthew Hatton ranked in the top 10 was the WBC. They had him ranked at number 10. So it begs the obvious question, how did Matthew Hatton get a title shot at a higher weight class when he was ranked number 10 in the welterweight division? Now keep in mind, guys, even when Jermall Charlo moved up to 160, he actually had to fight one or two guys before he became the mandatory for Canelo's belt. So that's not adding up at all, the fact that Matthew Hatton even got the title shot. But this shouldn't surprise you because this is the WBC, the same organization that just recently ordered Canelo Alvarez to fight Yildirim. Even though the WBC president, Mauricio Solomon, he did come out and say it was Canelo Alvarez that actually requested this fight. But even with that being the case, you still obliged him. The WBC, they granted Canelo Alvarez's wish. So this was Canelo Alvarez's first title shot after 6 years as a pro. Once again, by way of contrast to Floyd Mayweather's 2 years as a pro. But still, even after 6 years, Canelo Alvarez, he still hadn't faced a lineal champion type of opponent. He still hadn't faced the Canelo Hernandez type of opponent that Floyd Mayweather had to face within 2 years of his career. Remember, the whole purpose of this video is to find out if Canelo was following the green print, the blueprint, following everything that Floyd Mayweather did in his career, right? Let's move on. So if Canelo didn't fight the number 1, the number 2, the number 3, if he still hadn't fought and beat anyone in his division in the top 5 in 6 years, how long did it take for him to take that step up in competition? Let's take a look at Canelo's record again. So you guys can see all the way at the bottom, it shows that he fought Ricky Hatton. So following Ricky Hatton, he beat Ryan Rose, he beat Alfonso Gomez, then he beat Kermit Cintron, then he beat a way past his prime Shane Mosley. Matter of fact, just to show you guys, here are the ratings in 2011 on Ring magazine on BoxRec. Now, and as we scroll all the way down to the junior middleweight division, what you'll find out is Shane Mosley wasn't even ranked in the top 10 when Canelo Alvarez fought him. In fact, Shane Mosley was considered so far past his prime that Oscar De La Hoya gave Canelo a personal mission, and he told him, you have to knock him out to make a serious statement. And unlike Floyd Mayweather knocking out the lineal champion in his first title shot, and the number 1 mandatory, who was a real number 1 contender, Angel Manfredi, Canelo couldn't duplicate Floyd Mayweather's success. And he could not meet the expectations of his promoter, Oscar De La Hoya, which was to get the way past his prime Shane Mosley out of there. So let's get back to Canelo's record. So after he beats Shane Mosley, he then fights Josito Lopez. For those of you guys who don't know or don't remember, Josito Lopez was supposed to be an easy fight for Victor Ortiz, but he ended up pulling off the huge upset, and Canelo, who was fighting at 154, he decided to bring Lopez up to 154, 2 weight classes, and surprisingly, the fight was very competitive until Canelo Alvarez stopped him. So then he moves on, and then he finally fights a top 3 ranked real champion, and that is Austin Trout. So it took Canelo Alvarez an additional 2 years, which is a total of 8 years, before he even fought someone that was ranked in the top 5 of his division. And ironically enough, Canelo Alvarez didn't even call out Trout. This fight was ordered by Floyd Mayweather because Floyd told Canelo's people, you have to fight someone and beat someone so we can promote our fight. And Floyd was absolutely right, because Canelo going in there and beating one of the best champions in the division before he fights Floyd Mayweather, it leaves no excuses for if he loses to Floyd. I mean, once you become a world champion, there already aren't any excuses. But once you become a unified champion, you definitely have no legitimate excuses for why you lost. You're a unified champion. Don't nobody need to hold your hand anymore. You can walk across the street by yourself now. You don't need no help. The training wheels are off. So once again, it took Floyd Mayweather 2 years to step up to top-notch competition and beat the lineal champion. It actually took Canelo Alvarez 8 years to step up to top-notch competition, and that was against Austin Trout. Now, the real crazy thing is Floyd Mayweather, he turned pro at age 20, roughly 20. He was 19, about to turn 20. Canelo, on the other hand, he turned pro at age 15, but yet Floyd Mayweather was still younger than Canelo when Floyd Mayweather stepped up in competition. Floyd was 22 when he did it. Canelo was 23 when he did it against Austin Trout. All right, guys, so now let's talk about who these guys fought before they became superstars, before they became the A-side, the cash cow. In other words, who did they have to fight? Who did they call out? Now, this is the misconception, or at least the falsehoods that have been spreaded when it comes to Floyd Mayweather's resume, by a lot of Floyd Mayweather detractors, obviously. Now, when it comes to Floyd Mayweather, you have some fans that haven't followed Floyd Mayweather's entire career. They don't even know the difference between Pretty Boy Floyd and Money Mayweather. Now, some fans, on the other hand, they do know the difference between Pretty Boy Floyd and Money Mayweather. But regardless if they know or not, they will still try to act like they didn't know everything that Floyd Mayweather did leading up to him becoming the cash cow in the sport of boxing. For example, did you guys know that way before Floyd Mayweather became the big superstar, Floyd Mayweather was the boogeyman? That's right, Floyd Mayweather, he was no different than a Demetrius Andrade, a Jamal Charlo, a Devin Haney, right? That was Floyd Mayweather way before he became a superstar. He was calling out all of the most dangerous fighters, but not only was he calling them out, the ones he could get in the ring, he was dominating them. When he fought against Diego Corrales, that was Floyd Mayweather's Demetrius Andrade type of opponent, right? But Floyd Mayweather was calling out all of the most dangerous fighters in his division and even above his division. Matter of fact, let me go ahead and play this clip so you guys know exactly what I'm talking about.
Stay at 130 where there are other high-profile fighters, or do you want to move up in weight to challenge some of the 135-pounders?
Well, you know, I would like to fight Prince Nassim. Hopefully, we can meet at 128, or he can come up to 130. We can fight, or I can fight the winner of Casamayor.
Prince Nassim isn't going to fight you.
Well, everybody want to see
after he saw this, it ain't going to happen.
You know, I really want to fight Prince Nassim, but I know you don't want to fight. But hopefully, I can fight the winner of Casamayor and free test. A lot of amateur experience helped. You know, I love fighting on HBO. I love being with Top Rank, and it was just a learning experience for me tonight.
Is this finally your last fight at 130?
This is my last fight at 130 pounds. I can't make the weight no more. It was hard getting down, you know, to 130 pounds, but I got there. I'm looking forward to moving up to 135, fighting Paul Spadafore, Jose Castillo, and hopefully moving to 140 and fighting Constance Tszyu.
There are some very good challengers out there in the lightweight division still, like Lescano and Casamayor and possibly Freitas, maybe some others. Why wouldn't you want to clean that up before you moved up in weight?
Well, I actually fight these guys in the past. I've been trying to get Lescano, Casamayor, Freitas in the past. These guys didn't want to fight me, so I'm finna move up to bigger and better things. I'm looking forward to fighting Arturo Gatti next. That's a big pay-per-view fight for me, and that's what I'm looking forward to doing. Well, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. It's a good fight next week. Arturo Gatti's a tough opponent. I want to fight the best they got out there. I would love to fight Constance Tszyu, Arturo Gatti, the best out there. And I hear that Shane Mosley is coming down to 147. I hear Oscar De La Hoya is coming down to 147. For Floyd Mayweather is willing to go to 147 and fight Shane Mosley or fight Oscar De La Hoya.
All right, so there it is. Now, just in case some of you guys don't know, some of those names that Floyd Mayweather was calling out, some of those guys were considered pound for pound some of the best fighters in the world. Costa Tszyu, someone that Floyd Mayweather constantly called out, at the time he was considered pound for pound number 3, the best fighter in the world. The only reason Floyd Mayweather didn't end up fighting Costa Tszyu is because Costa Tszyu ended up losing to Ricky Hatton. He got stopped, he quit against Ricky Hatton, and then Floyd Mayweather ended up beating Ricky Hatton. When Ricky Hatton stopped Costa Tszyu, Ricky Hatton was considered pound for pound number 4, the best fighter in the world. And then you have all these other fighters that he called out. For people that don't remember or don't know, Acelino Popo Freitas, an undefeated champion, one of the hardest punchers in the sport at the time, one of the most dangerous fighters in the sport at the time. He wasn't chasing Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather was chasing him. Same thing with Casamayor, Joel Casamayor, the Cuban gold medalist in the Olympics, undefeated champion. Both Acelino Freitas and Joel Casamayor completely avoided Floyd Mayweather. Naseem Hamed, one of the best fighters at the time, one of the most talented fighters at the time, undefeated champion, he avoided Floyd Mayweather. And it was funny because when reporters would ask him, what do you think about Floyd Mayweather calling you out? The only thing Naseem would say is how good of a fighter Floyd Mayweather is. Now, sure, Naseem, he called out other fighters, but he made sure he didn't mention Floyd Mayweather's name. So this is the reputation that Floyd Mayweather had before he was a big star in the sport of boxing. So when it comes to Canelo Alvarez, who did he call out before he became a big star? Remember, we know he called Floyd Mayweather, but that's the fight. That loss is what actually made Canelo Alvarez a star. The question is, who did he ever call up leading up to the Floyd Mayweather fight? Did he call out the Charlo brothers? Did he call out Demetrius Andrade? Did he call out Erislandy Lara? Did he call out Gennady Golovkin? Now you could say, well, hey, he called out Floyd Mayweather. I mean, Floyd Mayweather is the best fighter in the world, right? But once again, guys, the difference from Canelo and Floyd Mayweather is Floyd Mayweather was often calling out not only the best fighters, but he was calling out the best fighters at higher weight classes. He was talking about moving up to weight, moving up one division and fighting this guy, then move up another division and fight Costa Tszyu. This is what Floyd Mayweather was talking about. Now, Canelo Alvarez, on the other hand, the only fighter he ever called out in his career is Floyd Mayweather. And Canelo Alvarez was at 154 pounds, so he was calling out someone at a lower weight class. But not only was Floyd Mayweather at a lower weight class, you guys have to remember Canelo Alvarez rehydrates all the way up to like 180 pounds. He's already admitted that. He rehydrates all the way up to 180 plus when he fights at 154. I have a buddy in Las Vegas who's a boxing gym owner, and he told me that when no one knew who Canelo was, when he was just coming up, he would always be hanging out in Las Vegas, and the gym owner who I'm talking about, he didn't know who Canelo was at the time because nobody really knew who he was, but he told him, I'm a boxer, blah, 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 I'm Canelo. And he was asking him, what division do you fight at? And at the time, I think Canelo was fighting at like 135, right? But Canelo Alvarez, according to my friend, Canelo used to walk around in Las Vegas all the time around 200 pounds. He said he would be anywhere from about 185 to 200 pounds, which now makes more sense why he would be rehydrating to 185 pounds during a fight. So my point is, Canelo, he understood, yes, Floyd Mayweather is extremely talented, but he's too small. He's too small. He's not going to be able to knock me out. If he beats me, he's just going to outbox me. And if I could survive 12 rounds with him, maybe my stock will still go up if I don't look that bad in a losing effort. And as we all know, that's exactly what happened. Canelo Alvarez is the only fighter that I know that basically became a superstar by losing one of the most important fights of his career. So guys, so far, does it sound like Canelo Alvarez was just doing the same thing that Floyd Mayweather did? So far, because we ain't finished yet. I think it's fair to say at this point, the only thing that Canelo and Floyd Mayweather have in common is that they both aspire to be the biggest star in boxing, and they're both boxers. That's about the only thing they have in common. Oh yeah, and on top of all of that, Canelo Alvarez has also used the Floyd Mayweather shoulder roll. He was trying to fight like Floyd Mayweather, but to no success.
Huh? Man, what you doing? You fucking things up.
Matter of fact, something else that Canelo and Oscar De La Hoya have in common is they both wanted to fight like Floyd Mayweather. In fact, Oscar De La Hoya, he was the first boxer to hire Floyd Mayweather's father as a full-time head trainer. And then shortly after Oscar hired Floyd Mayweather Sr., he tried to also use the Floyd Mayweather shoulder roll to no avail. I still remember it to this day. Oscar De La Hoya was fighting against Fernando Vargas. It was around the 9th round. His back was against the ropes and he went into that shoulder roll. And when he went into that shoulder roll, man, Fernando Vargas, he drilled him with right hands, just like Alfonso Gomez did to Canelo Alvarez in that clip I just played for you guys. All right, so back to the top. Let's talk about rematches. Did Canelo Alvarez do the same thing that Floyd Mayweather did when it came to rematches? When Floyd Mayweather had a very surprisingly tough fight with Jose Luis Castillo, and even HBO's Jim Lampley and Larry Merchant said they thought Castillo won the fight. But just to tell you guys the whole story, because I remember this like it was yesterday, back in the day, HBO, they would play the fight live, and then they would play it like the following week. It would usually come on around Tuesday or something like that. And when they re-aired the fight, Jim Lampley said, maybe it was just me and Larry that thought Castillo won the fight, because after the fight and the interviews, we asked the boxing writers that were sitting ringside, and 8 out of the 12 judges had Floyd Mayweather winning the fight. This is what Jim Lampley said out of his own mouth. But regardless of that, it was still a very tough fight for Floyd Mayweather. And Larry Merchant told Floyd Mayweather he thought Castillo won the fight. So what does Floyd Mayweather do? And what did Floyd Mayweather say to Larry Merchant?
Fight that you anticipated with what you came into the ring with.
With one arm, yes. One arm, yes. If you want a rematch, we can do it again.
Okay, so we've seen what Floyd Mayweather said and what he actually did right after the Castillo fight. After probably the toughest fight of his career at that point, when Floyd Mayweather still walked away with the win, just because Larry Merchant told him he thought Castillo won the fight, Floyd Mayweather said, well, we can do it again if he wants to do it again. And that's exactly what happened. So when Canelo was in the exact same situation with Erislandy Lara, a fight that many people thought he actually lost, what did Canelo Alvarez say by way of contrast after he got the win over Erislandy Lara in his post-fight interview?
Many people in your camp did not want you to take this fight. Would you fight Lara again?
Muchos querían que tú no tomaras esta pelea frente a Erislandy Lara del campamento tuyo. ¿Tú lo pelearías otra vez con él?
Cuando se enseña a pelear, le doy la revancha.
When he learns how to fight, then I'll give him the rematch.
There it is, guys. Apples and oranges, night and day. Now, Canelo Alvarez did give Gennady Golovkin a rematch, but that was an entirely different situation because the fight ended in a draw. When you lose to someone or the fight ends in a draw, you almost have to take the rematch. You're going to either want to take the rematch because of pride, because you know you didn't win the fight, officially you didn't get a W, and on top of that, everyone around you is going to pressure you to take the rematch. The networks, the promoters, everyone, because there's unfinished business there. So that's why he took that rematch. But when Canelo Alvarez walked away with the W, the same way Floyd Mayweather walked away with the W in the first Castillo fight, he never looked back. Canelo said to himself, no way I'm getting in the ring with that guy again. Because Canelo, he knew that that was a very, very difficult style. He kept accusing Edeslani Lara of running. But fighters like Mike Tyson and other aggressive fighters, they deal with fighters that quote unquote run all the time, and they still got the win. They still got the knockout. So you telling me Canelo, he has all of these fights and he still doesn't know how to cut off the ring? I once heard Floyd Mayweather say at his gym, you box the banger and you bang the boxer. And Floyd Mayweather, he's also had fighters, they were actually moving away from him, quote unquote running. And Floyd Mayweather, he tracked them down and knocked them out. When he fought against fighters like Sharmba Mitchell, when he fought against Zab Judah, Floyd Mayweather was the aggressor. And it was Zab Judah, it was Sharmba Mitchell that was trying to box Floyd. But Floyd Mayweather continued to walk them down to get the victory. He ended up knocking out Sharmba Mitchell, and then Zab Judah, he ended up throwing a low blow, and you know how that fight ended. But before he did that, Floyd Mayweather was actually on the verge of stopping Zab Judah. So the question is, why couldn't Canelo Alvarez do the same thing to Edeslani Lara? Why couldn't Canelo do the same thing to Lara that James Toney did to Michael Nunn? Now, if you want to talk about running, Michael Nunn was a real runner in the ring. I mean, he was one of them type of fighters that just moved, and didn't even really throw punches, right? James Toney knocked him out. Why couldn't Canelo do the same thing? Moving on. So now we compare the current Canelo Alvarez, present today, the 30-year-old Canelo Alvarez to the 30-year-old Floyd Mayweather. And keep in mind, now we're talking about Money Mayweather, because the fights I'm about to mention right now are all post Oscar De La Hoya. So let's get into it, and let's start with Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather at age 30, back in 2009, he fights Ricky Hatton. This was his very first fight after he beat Oscar De La Hoya. Ricky Hatton was considered pound for pound top 10, one of the best fighters in the world. And what you guys have to understand is this was a time when the pound for pound list was legit. It was extremely reliable. It was completely non-biased because this was before the impact of social media. Because of the emergence of social media. Now, today you have a lot of people's pound for pound list. It looks more like a boxing fan's favorite fighters list, because a lot of websites that are putting their list up are constantly listening to the comments online or reading the comments online, therefore making it more of a popular list as opposed to a pound for pound list. Everything has completely changed today. The Ring magazine and KO magazine back in the day used to be the most reliable source of boxing information in the whole sport. But now the Ring magazine is owned by Oscar De La Hoya. So there's a huge conflict of interest there. So there it is. Floyd Mayweather's first fight after the big De La Hoya win was against Ricky Hatton, who was considered pound for pound number 8 on Ring magazine's list. He was ranked number 5 in the KO magazine, which was the Ring magazine's biggest rival back in the day. And you guys have to understand how Ricky Hatton became pound for pound one of the best fighters in the world. It was because he beat Kostya Tszyu. Kostya Tszyu at the time was considered number 3 pound for pound the best fighter in the world. Ricky Hatton pulled off the upset, forced Kostya Tszyu to quit. That's how he got the Floyd Mayweather fight. Floyd Mayweather stopped Ricky Hatton, who was undefeated at the time. After Floyd stops Ricky Hatton, Floyd retires. He takes a 2-year layoff. After a 2-year layoff, the first person he comes back to fight is Juan Manuel Marquez. Now let's see how high Juan Manuel Marquez was ranked on that pound for pound list. There it is. As you can see right there, Juan Manuel Marquez was ranked number 2, the best fighter in the world, when Floyd Mayweather fought him and beat him. And if you're wondering why Mayweather's name is not on the list, because like I told you, he was coming out of retirement when he fought Marquez. And mind you guys, this is the same Marquez. The Marquez that Floyd Mayweather beat. This is the same Marquez that knocked out Manny Pacquiao, that Pacquiao struggled against in 4 fights. And Floyd Mayweather, he made it look like one of his easiest fights of his career. In fact, Manny Pacquiao, he fought Marquez in the same division that Floyd Mayweather fought him in. And I remember actually going into the 3rd fight, when Manny Pacquiao did his pre-fight interview talking about the fight, Pac said, "I believe I have the edge because I'm bigger than Marquez now. I've been fighting bigger guys at the welterweight division." And in that 3rd fight, many people thought Pacquiao lost. And then in the 4th fight, of course, he got knocked out in that division. So that completely destroys any excuses of saying that Marquez was too small for Floyd Mayweather. But even if you are going to say that, you would have to say Floyd Mayweather was too small for Canelo Alvarez. You guys cannot have it both ways. Because the truth is, Mayweather and Marquez were more closer to the same weight than Mayweather and Canelo were. Canelo outweighed Floyd Mayweather by 15 pounds the night of the fight and was 36 going on 37 years old. So let's move on to Floyd Mayweather's next opponent. Then he fought Sugar Shane Mosley. Let's look at where Shane Mosley ranked on that pound-for-pound list at the time. Shane Mosley was ranked number 3, pound-for-pound, the best fighter in the world at the time. Matter of fact, you know what Jim Lampley said when Jim was calling Shane Mosley's fight when he had stopped Margarito? You know what he said right before Mosley stopped Margarito? Check this clip out.
Shane Mosley at age 37 is trying to become the number 1 welterweight in the world. And that's the way he'd be recognized if he can beat this man in the way that he's beating him right now. Margarito gets no defense at all for punches. This fight could be stopped any second now. Margarito is getting hit flush with every right hand. There's another one. There's a big left hook. Why not stop it now? And there's the white towel from the corner. And Shane Mosley has annihilated Antonio Margarito. Can that man fight?
Can that man fight is what you just heard Larry Merchant say. So you heard Jim Lampley say that if Shane Mosley beats this man Margarito, he becomes the number 1 best welterweight in the division. This is who Floyd Mayweather fought right after that fight. So since Floyd Mayweather came out of retirement, he fought 3 fighters that were considered top 10 pound for pound the best fighters in the world. And 2 out of the 3 were considered top 3 pound for pound the best fighters in the world. So in total, Floyd Mayweather fought at least 6 fighters that were currently considered pound for pound top 10 one of the best fighters in the world. So just to clearly understand this, imagine if a fighter today beat 6 out of 10 of the current fighters that were considered pound for pound the best fighters in the world today. That's pretty much what Floyd Mayweather was able to do. And mind you, the last 3 pound for pound fighters he beat, this was Money Mayweather. This wasn't even Pretty Boy Floyd Mayweather. So then Floyd Mayweather, he goes on, he fights Victor Ortiz, he fights Robert Guerrero. Now, even though those guys weren't on the pound for pound list, one thing all of Floyd Mayweather's, or at least the vast majority of all of his opponents have in common is they were always coming off of their biggest wins. By way of contrast, Canelo is usually fighting guys coming off of their worst performance. Victor Ortiz had just beat the undefeated Andre Berto, who at the time was a very big deal in the sport of boxing. Floyd beat Mosley after Mosley's biggest win of his career, which was Margarito. Floyd beat Cotto after Cotto's biggest career win, avenging a cheating Margarito. Floyd Mayweather beat Ricky Hatton after Ricky Hatton knocked out Jose Luis Castillo. He fought Maidana after Maidana pulled off an upset and beat the undefeated Adrian Broner. Once again, Canelo Alvarez, he fights Caleb Smith after his performance against John Ryder. He fought Kovalev after Kovalev almost got knocked out by Anthony Yarde and then was knocked out twice previously before the Canelo fight. He fought James Kirkland after James was staggering all over the ring, almost got knocked out, but ended up finally getting the win over Glenn Tapia. Canelo is currently scheduled to fight Avni Yildirim, a man that is coming off of a loss. And before that loss to Anthony Durrell, he also lost to Chris Eubank by way of knockout. He's planning on fighting BJ Saunders after he gets past Yildirim. Now, when it comes to BJ Saunders, after BJ had the best performance of his career when he completely outboxed and dominated David Lemieux, Canelo and his team, they said, and I quote, "We're not interested in that fight because we don't like BJ Saunders' style." That's exactly what they said. They said they didn't like his style. Coincidentally, the same thing they said about Andrade. They said they didn't want to fight him because they didn't like his style. Fast forward to present day, after BJ Saunders comes off of his worst performance, now Canelo Alvarez is planning on fighting him. Now, once again, remember guys, this video is all about contrast because Canelo fans keep saying Canelo did everything that Floyd Mayweather did. He's just doing the same things that Floyd Mayweather did. And I haven't even went into the Manny Pacquiao situation yet. We're going to get into that as well. But let's go back to the 30-year-old Canelo Alvarez today and who he fought at 30 compared to who Floyd Mayweather fought. Canelo Alvarez has only fought one fighter that was on the pound-for-pound list, compared to Floyd Mayweather, who fought 3 top 10 pound-for-pound fighters in a row. Canelo only fought one in his entire career, and that was Gennady Golovkin. And we all know the first fight was a draw, and a lot of people believe he lost the second fight. Once again, guys, look at the dichotomy. Floyd Mayweather dominated every fighter that he beat that was on that pound-for-pound list. None of those fights ended in controversy. You can never say any of those guys that Floyd Mayweather beat that was on a pound-for-pound list, the other guy really won the fight. You can't say that. There's only one fight in Floyd Mayweather's career that you can question and say who won the fight. We already talked about that. That's Jose Luis Castillo. And Floyd Mayweather, he avenged the close decision in the first fight and dominated him in the second fight. Being a great fighter is about resume and dominance. And speaking of resume, a lot of you fans get that word confused because some of you guys, or a lot of you guys who defend Canelo, you think that having a good resume includes the guys, the big names that you lost to. But that makes no sense because any of us can get in the ring right now and lose to a whole bunch of people and say, oh, look how great I am. I lost to all of those guys. It doesn't work that way. So for you to try to say he's been in the ring with Floyd Mayweather, that doesn't improve or enhance Canelo Alvarez's resume. Beating Floyd Mayweather is what enhances his resume. If losing to big names makes you a great fighter, if that's the case, Sean Porter, he should be rated way higher than Canelo Alvarez because he's been in the ring with everyone. Win, lose, or draw. Zab Judah should be considered greater than probably Floyd Mayweather because he's been in the ring with so many guys. He may have lost a lot of them, but he's been in the ring with a lot of big names. You don't get accolades for who you lose to. So when you remove the loss that Canelo suffered against Floyd Mayweather, what is his biggest win? His biggest win would be over Gennady Golovkin. And once again, that win was with complete controversy. His second biggest win would be Erislandy Lara. A lot of people think Lara won that fight. Canelo Alvarez, his most dominant performance against the biggest name is probably against who? Maybe Danny Jacobs, because I truly believe he won that fight, even though I heard some people say, you know, it should have went the other way. But no, I would say Canelo, that's the one fight he won when it comes to a bigger name without controversy. But once again, it is an actual fact that Floyd Mayweather has dominated better opponents than Canelo Alvarez has. In other words, when it comes to beating fighters with no controversy. All right, now let's talk about the Mayweather versus Pacquiao situation, because this is the main go-to when it comes to the excuses that Canelo Alvarez fans to say, oh, Canelo is just doing the same things that Floyd Mayweather did. Look at what he did with Pacquiao. He ducked Pacquiao for 8 years, etc., etc., etc. I'm about to go ahead and shut all that down right now with complete facts. Understand this, guys. Nothing that I say in this video is my opinion. It's speculation. It's all factual. It's all the whole truth. Let me go ahead and play this clip for you guys. And once again, I want everyone to share this video when you got some kind of decaf talking sideways, making stuff up. All you have to do is send them the link to this video because there's nothing but the whole truth here. Now check out this clip.
What do you think then that in the fullness of time, when people look back in history, they will see that Pacquiao is the man that Mayweather didn't fight rather than Pacquiao didn't get the Mayweather?
I don't think it'll come across that way. I think people will say, why didn't they fight each other? And blame both guys, to be honest with you, because the first negotiation we were against the blood test, and it was kind of our fault that the first time it didn't work. Because the first negotiation we were against the blood test, and it was kind of our fault that the first time it didn't work. On our side, I honestly think a little bit that Bob wants that fight to be our last fight. On our side, I honestly think a little bit that Bob wants that fight to be our last fight.
Guys, that is what you call irrefutable evidence. That is the murder suspect confessing to the crime, telling the police, I can tell you where the bodies are, I can tell you where the murder weapon is, anything else you need to know, you just let me know. So to try to compare Canelo avoiding Jermall Charlo or Demetrius Andrade to Floyd Mayweather and the whole Manny Pacquiao situation, all that does is make Canelo look even worse. You guys are trying to defend Canelo, but you're doing Canelo a huge disservice. Because if Canelo was trying to do the same thing that Floyd Mayweather did with Manny Pacquiao, Canelo would have negotiated with Canelo Alvarez way before he even moved to 160. He would have started negotiations at 154 when the Charlo brothers and Demetrius Andrade were champions. Canelo didn't have a belt, and the champions were calling out the challenger Canelo. Did Canelo ever start negotiations with Demetrius Andrade or Charlo like Floyd Mayweather did from the get? Absolutely not. Floyd Mayweather not only negotiated with Manny Pacquiao from the start, he also agreed to all of Manny Pacquiao's demands. Did you guys know Manny Pacquiao also had demands in the contract? Yeah, he had his demands, and Floyd Mayweather agreed to all of his demands. The only way you could say, oh, Canelo is just doing the same thing that Floyd Mayweather did, the only way you could say that is if Canelo negotiated with Andrade, negotiated with Jermall Charlo, and Canelo agreed to all of the terms on a contract and was ready to sign and go until Charlo or Andrade decided to pull out of the fight because they did not want to be tested. That would be the only way you would be able to say, well, Canelo is only doing the same things that Floyd Mayweather did. And then you have some fans that will try to obviously defend Canelo by saying, hey, well, Charlo turned down the fight. Remember what his brother said? His brother said he turned down the fight. Now, before I completely debunk that, let's just remember that was at 160. This was already about 3 years after the Charlo brothers and Demetrius Andrade had already been calling out Canelo Alvarez. So still, if we're comparing the situation to Floyd's, Canelo was supposed to be negotiating with Jermall Charlo 3 years ago. But let me just debunk the whole Jermall Charlo turned down the fight. Guys, remember, Jermall Charlo was Canelo Alvarez's mandatory. He had been Canelo's mandatory for 2 years. Listen, if Jermall Charlo had turned down a fight to face the champion when he's the mandatory, how did he end up with Canelo's belt? Because the way it usually works is if a mandatory decides he doesn't want to fight the champion, he's no longer going to be the mandatory. and they're going to go to the next person that is rated when it comes to that organization, the WBC. Why would Canelo vacate his belt and give his belt to Charlo when Charlo doesn't want to fight him? Does that make any sense, guys? I mean, if you think about it, right now, Ryan Garcia is the mandatory for Devin Haney. But Ryan Garcia, he doesn't have any interest in fighting the champion, Devin Haney. He wants to fight Tank Davis. So do you think Devin Haney is now going to vacate his belt and give his belt to Ryan Garcia because Ryan doesn't want the fight? Of course not. You see how that makes no sense? There's absolutely no way Canelo would have vacated his belt if Jermall Charlo turned down a fight. Not only that, but when Canelo aggressively tried to pursue the Kovalev fight, Kovalev turned down the first fight. And Canelo came back to the negotiating table. That's how bad he wanted the Kovalev fight. He did the same thing with Caleb Plant. He started light negotiations with Caleb Plant, walked away, came back, and now he's talking about still fighting Caleb Plant after he gets past Avni Yildirim and BJ Saunders. So why hasn't he sat down and had a serious negotiation with Charlo or Andre? We know what time it is. And now, the last segment of this video is comparing who Canelo Alvarez will be fighting when he's in his mid-30s and even late 30s compared to who Floyd Mayweather fought. Remember, guys, Floyd Mayweather fought a 23-year-old Canelo Alvarez at age 36. A man that was 14, 15 years younger than him, who was an undefeated champion, unified champion at a higher weight class, outweighed Floyd Mayweather by 15 pounds. How many of you guys, since you always talk about experience, how many of you guys see Canelo Alvarez at age 36 fighting against a young, undefeated fighter that many believe is the future of the sport at a higher weight class? How many of you guys see Canelo fighting an opponent like that and beating him decisively? Anyway, moving on. Then Floyd Mayweather, he fought Manny Pacquiao at age 38. At the time Floyd Mayweather fought Manny Pacquiao, Pacquiao was considered number 2, pound for pound, the best fighter in the world on many people's lists. In fact, all the polls that were conducted on who they thought was going to win were in favor of Manny Pacquiao. So according to the fans poll, Manny Pacquiao was even the favorite. And then we all know that after Manny Pacquiao lost to Floyd Mayweather, he put on probably one of his best performances, beating Tim Bradley in the third fight. And then 4-5 years later, he completely dominates Keith Thurman, a 30-year-old Keith Thurman. The point is, you can't make any excuses for why Manny Pacquiao lost to Floyd. Floyd Mayweather was just always better than him. So going back to Canelo Alvarez, can any of you guys honestly see Canelo Alvarez fighting that level of opposition? A pound for pound number 2 fighter, or a younger version of Canelo Alvarez that Alvarez would have to actually face, if you know what I mean. Do you see Canelo Alvarez once again beating a young, hungry 23-year-old when Canelo Alvarez is 35 or 36 years old? We'll see what Canelo decides to do. So with that being said, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and rest my case. It is a fact that if anything, Canelo Alvarez has been trying to avoid doing everything that Floyd Mayweather has done in his career. I remember Eddie Hearn, he said years ago when I interviewed him for the first time, he said the only way you're gonna beat Floyd Mayweather is either with a baseball bat or if you cheat. You get on some kind of steroids or something like that. That's the only way you have a chance. Nacho Beristain, he said that Floyd Mayweather is simply the best. He's the Michael Jordan of the sport. Canelo Alvarez's own trainer, he said that the man is simply the best. Mikey Garcia said that Floyd Mayweather was his favorite fighter and Mikey Garcia's father and trainer, he said that Floyd Mayweather is the greatest of all time. Oscar De La Hoya said after he seen what Floyd did to Shane Mosley, who, like I told you, at the time was considered pound for pound, number 3 the best fighter in the world, I believe. Oscar De La Hoya said, Floyd Mayweather, it could be argued that he's the best ever. When I interviewed Tito Trinidad and I asked him, where would you rank Floyd Mayweather in terms of all the greats? Tito Trinidad said, I would put Floyd Mayweather top 2, the greatest fighter of all time. I didn't ask him who he had number 1. Maybe he had himself number 1. Or maybe it was Sugar Ray Robinson, I don't know. But he said, I would put Floyd Mayweather as top 2, the greatest fighter of all time. Now remember, guys, it's the Canelo fans that wanted to compare Canelo to Floyd Mayweather. So we're giving them what they wanted. The question now is, how come no one has been saying these things that they've been saying about Floyd? How come none of them have been saying these things about Canelo Alvarez? And a lot of the names I mentioned, the people that were praising Floyd Mayweather this way, were Mexican. So why aren't they saying these things about Canelo Alvarez? Because they don't see Canelo Alvarez as being anywhere near Floyd Mayweather's level. Even Oscar De La Hoya, who promoted Canelo Alvarez for years, has never come close to saying that Canelo Alvarez was a future top 5 GOAT. He's never said anything like that. He's never said, you know, if Canelo keeps going at this rate, I could see him as possibly the best ever. He's never said that about Canelo, and he promoted Canelo for years. Canelo has been his right-hand man for years. So that's a wrap, man. There's nothing else to say. 100% facts and the whole truth. That's all you're ever gonna get on this channel. You can always go anywhere on the internet and listen to someone or read an article hearing exactly what you want to hear. But coming to my channel is like going to the doctor's office, because the doctor is never going to just tell you what you want to hear to make you feel better. He's going to tell you the truth, regardless if it's good news or bad news. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one. Fellas, I've got some great news for you. If you've lost your hair or have a receding hairline, the time has come when you can finally get your hairline back through a process called scalp micropigmentation. So here's how it works. It's a hair tattoo that replicates the look of your hair follicles when you have fully shaved it down. Basically, you will end up with a haircut shape up or an edge up. What they do is they tattoo small dots that look like hair follicles in the areas where you have lost your hair, and then blend it with your existing hair. You can even choose what type of hairline you want, hard shape up or soft and natural finish. And to maintain it, all you gotta do is shave your hair every few days, which is something you already were probably doing anyway. Make sure you go ahead and contact my man Scalp Carolinas on Instagram. All right, now check this out, guys. If you're looking to repair eczema scars, burns and bruises, dark spots and blemishes, then this right here is the perfect product for you guys. It's called Elo Diki Face and Body Oil. Athletes and top-ranking boxers, they're also using it after training to reduce swelling, inflammation, and to ease the pain. So get yours today. Go to elodiki.com, like them on Facebook, and follow them on Instagram.